Well, today, power session number 6, preparing, interesting way to word this, prepare to work with buyers. Knowledge is power. This is an interesting class, at least I think so, but I have a low threshold for entertainment, so you may not find it as interesting. And actually, one of the more important ones, and we've actually reached a point where this is the sort of things that separate people from being successful and not being successful. You'll see what I mean in a minute. So there's our schedule doesn't follow that schedule, but you've all received copies of the schedule. The stop and do. One of the values of this class is, if nothing else, it reminds you to do the daily 10-4. And to add 10 people to your database, connect with 10 people, write 10 notes, preview 10 homes a week. And one of the things that I did, this is sort of a summary of something that I had done in the prospecting class. But if you were to time block, and by the way, people that are successful generally block out time when they're going to do things. Right? The idea that you're going to do it freestyle doesn't seem to work very well. And I realized, I'm an independent contractor. I got into this so I could have freedom, creativity. At this point, I would block the time. And whether or not you spend 30 minutes to an hour studying the market depends upon how much money do you want to make. And so you ought to devote, I would recommend, if you'd like to make 16 transactions in a year, right, which wouldn't be a bad thing. Right? You could live on that, probably. You might have to cut back a little, but you could probably live on 180,000 in commissions. An hour to study the market, an hour to study scripts, and 3 to 4 hours for lead generation. Once the scripts become good, what's going to happen is that this is going to evolve, because after a while, you're going to know the market, you're going to know the scripts, and you'll have clients. That doesn't mean you shouldn't stop lead generating, but in order to get going, you need to block out time to do these things. I'm going to spend a bit of time on studying the market today. That's one of my favorite subjects. And so I don't think I've done that. Let me power up. I thought I had put everything up. One of the things that is an underutilized resource. Come on. There we go. An underutilized resource I find is kw.com. And for example, did you know that May was Lead Generation Month? Internet Lead Generation Month. They've been doing a series of webinars on lead generation, best practices. At the front right there, today at noon, which is 2 o'clock, that's their time, but it's noon our time. Don't lose another lead, best practices for lead cultivation. Tomorrow, make it happen, put internet lead generation plan into action. The ones that they've already held are online, you can watch them. So you ought to log into this every once in a while. And what we're looking for is the Power Hour video. And, and watch a power introduction, that's not it. What am I looking for? Oh, Power Up, that's what I'm looking for. And I should have queued this up, but I wanted to show you, to demonstrate. So what I usually do is they have a lot of these. Let me just pick one.
Good morning and welcome to Power Up with Matt.
I should edit this out. Coaching. Power. Why don't we not do that, just Power Hour? Well, I'm not going to do that today. How about that? But what I'm recommending is that you spend some time looking at this. For example, you just click on one of these and you can register for the different classes. And if you're interested in KW Connect, has a ton of different classes, including our subject today, which is buyers. Home buyer tips, get what you want. Home buyers tips today's market. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, other than you ought to check into the kw.com. Up here is the schedule of events. If you click on View Calendar, it's going to show you all the events that are coming up for KW. You can watch them live. And what I usually do to find something, for example, lead generation. Let's just how about lead generation? Lead generation, Internet Lead Generation Archive. If you click on that, you're going to see these are the Internet Lead Generation webinars that have happened already that you could watch. I'm just saying you ought to spend some time on KW Connect. There's lots of good classes that you can download. All right, but we're going to, at this point, what we're scheduled to do, if you have leads, if you've been adding people to your database, now would be a good time to stop and call them. What we're going to do is postpone that for later, since watching everybody stare at each other doesn't always work so well. But the idea is that you need to make it a daily habit. Remember to make how many hours? 3 to 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. Get your head in the game. Why are buyers important? I have a profound thought. Buyers are responsible for 50% of all commission checks. This is a profound thought, right? Do you understand? Half of all the parties in a closing are buyers. And so if you have a good buyer system, which we're going to be talking about, buyers can be as easy to represent as sellers. The other advantage of buyers is, depending upon the buyers that you're dealing with, they may have a home to sell as well. They may buy and they may sell. A majority of people who buy a home will sell that home within 10 years. It depends. This varies a lot depending upon the kind of home they buy. People who buy in Saratoga and Silver Creek do not sell their home in 10 years. They're there for the duration. They wait till the kids have graduated from college, moved away, and they've retired, and then they sell their home, maybe. Right? You understand? But somebody who buys a first-time home buyer's townhouse or condo want to sell it as soon as they possibly can. So one way to get listings is to sell buyers' homes. You're planting the seeds for future business. The other advantage is that buyers are here. Their family, their friends, their co-workers are here. Referrals are here. Sellers usually move away, right, unless they're moving up into the area. They can be an excellent self-promotional and prospecting too. Buyer relationships can be for repeat and referral business, and without buyers, you cannot double-end a transaction. It says here, why are buyers bringing the money? That's another interesting idea. The whole point of listings is to find buyers. It says you're finding buyers is simple. One of the differences between buyers and sellers is that sellers generally hide out, right? Whereas buyers do things to let you know they're interested in buying. They, for example, search the internet. They download free reports. They set up IDX searches. They go to open houses, right? Sellers just sort of hang out. Right? They don't necessarily go places where you can easily find them. So as it says here, buyers are often saying, work with me. They usually want to work with agents. Most buyers, we're going to talk about, I call it listing buyers. And my theory was that it should be easier to get buyers to sign the listing agreement than sellers, because the buyers do not pay the commission. Do you understand there's a big philosophical question about who actually pays the commission? I don't know if you've ever heard, you hear agents debating this, right? Who pays the commission? Now, some people say, well, sellers pay the commission because the money that goes to pay the commission comes out of the seller's proceeds. But who puts the money into escrow? Does the seller put the money into escrow, or does the buyer puts the money into escrow? But why then? But the idea is, just so you understand this concept, is that as agents, we're supposed to get the seller more money than they would have gotten had they done it on their own. And because of that, that's where the commission comes from. But you understand, if buyers don't pay the commission per se, right, why not have an agent? Right? You understand, one of the things that you can say to a buyer is, this is all the things I'm going to do, and there's no cost to you for my service. The seller is going to pay me. If sellers are willing to sign a piece of paper saying they're going to work exclusively with you and they have to pay for it, why would buyers want to work exclusively with you when they don't have to pay for it? Most buyers end up settling on one agent. A significant number of buyers, almost half of all buyers, only interview really one agent. Right? They may talk to a lot of them. They want to work with agents. Servicing buyers is inexpensive. They're time-consuming, but not necessarily costly, except for gas. Sellers want you to do things, right? They want you to make flyers. They want you to run ads. They want you to do things. They want a virtual tour. They want professional photographs. They want you to do things. Buyers just want you to show them homes. So if you notice that when you're new, you have to list the last. Right, you understand? At some point, you have to make sure that your prospecting and lead generation includes sellers, or you're not probably going to be a happy agent. Right? I had 15 listings at one time, and I did not look busy. One of the things you'll notice is the agents with the most listings kind of look calm when they're in the office. Right? They sort of saunter through the office. You'll see them sitting around talking pleasantly to people on the phone. Agents with 3, 4, 5 buyers are in a hurry when they show up. They're rushing to the computer, rushing to the copy machine, rushing out to their car. Right? So you have to make that transition, but you always want to have a mixed group. You understand? Right now, a listing would be really good. There was a time not too long ago where a buyer was where the money was. Right? If you had a motivated buyer. But apart from the gas, your expenses are low. So when you're new, the idea is that you can get paid quicker. I've sold a home to a buyer at an open house. That day they bought a home. One time they bought that home. I actually had people walk in one time and say, this is it. We want to buy it. Right? Now I'll tell you something. If that happens to you when you're new in real estate, it's a bad thing, right? You understand? Because if that happens once when you're brand new, you get the idea sometimes that that's how it's supposed to be, right? And you're waiting for people to walk in and say, I want to buy the house, right? Your attitude should be, they don't want to buy that house, right? And you need to make a conversation and develop a relationship and show them other homes. But how long did it take? Right? One day, and I had a contract which closed 45 days later. If you list a home, right now it's pretty cool, right? You understand? It's going to get multiple offers probably and sell, but that's not always the case, right? We'll talk about days on market. What's the first step in accomplishing all the above? Finding out, oh my God, everything there is to know about the market and your inventory. We have hit one of the parts that separates people from the business. Right? Because a lot of people who get into real estate think, oh, this is going to be easy. Right? Being in real estate is easy. And so they don't put the time, when they hear that they ought to be spending an hour a day studying the market and previewing homes, that's when a lot of people don't do it and they end up leaving the business. You need to know what there is about market and the inventory. You're in the information business. You don't own any of the homes. This, by the way, is a great line from Gary Keller. Market knowledge is the only thing that trumps experience. Right? If you're new, There are going to be some agents that are going to be saying, I've been in real estate for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. But if you know more about what's going on in the market than they do, clients will want to work with you. That means you need to be we say 10 properties a week. If you're new, you ought to spend more time than that. I had a plan that I put together for another company many years ago. We actually time blocked out a typical new agent's day for like 6 months or something like that. And we wanted people to be looking at 5 homes a day minimum. All right, you understand, the more you know about property for sale, the more effective you're going to be in getting clients. It's when you can talk to them. What people want to hear from you is that you talking about homes for sale. You know what's going on in the market. Knowledge is power. Every call is a happy call. I wouldn't agree with that entirely. Many calls are happy calls. In other words, buyers are generally excited to hear from you because you're calling to let them know about new listings that have come on the market or to set up an appointment for them to find the home of their dreams, right? Are sellers always happy these days? Not always. No. A lot of sellers are selling. They're not happy, right? They're selling because they have to. They're selling because they're getting divorced. They're selling because somebody died. Buyers are generally happier. Be careful, though. The calls are happy ones if you've done a thorough job of preparing to work purposely with buyers. We're going to talk what that means. Talk about what that means. They can become a nightmare because you spend a lot of time, money, and energy. And there's nothing hurts more than spending a lot of time with a buyer and having them not buy anything. Today's plan of action: choose your area of specialization. What is that about? Do market research, complete a buyer's guide, and learn to qualify buyers in order to schedule them for a buyer consultation. Things that you're going to need is the E-Edge Buyer's Guide, and I'll show you how to find that online. The value proposition, remember from RevUp, we talked about value propositions, unique selling propositions. I'm sure you all have one, 2 or 3 of them. Right? You might want to have one for buyers and one for sellers. And your business-to-business vendor list, remember we talked about that, I'm sure you all have that, right? A list of all the different people. Would title reps be willing to talk to you about the escrow process? Home warranty reps, would they be willing to talk? You think so? You think they'd be interested in explaining what they do and how it works? I am knowledgeable and have power. That is our affirmation for today. Let's start with this. Choose an area of specialization. What's your niche or niche, depending on whether or not you talk with your pinky in the air? Geographic locations, demographic, first-time home buyers. One of the things that I included in the different slides and online, I hope you've all gotten my, how do I make this bigger? I don't need that. How about that? That'll help a little. This is from the 2011 National Association of Realtors profile of buyers and sellers, which is in one of the folders that I sent you a link to. First-time home buyers in 2011 were 37%. They were 50% in 2010. A lot of that, I think, had to do with the fact that people were selling only that had to, and that generally is in the lower ranges. But so we're talking about 37%. If we look at it by area, this is for 2011, 42% of all the buyers in the West were first-time home buyers. I would recommend that you consider that as a niche if you're new. The more sophisticated the buyer is, the harder it is for people that are new to work with them because they know more. They understand more. Some of them have bought and sold more homes than you have, right? It's always tough, right? And they have investments, and they've gone through the process. First-time home buyers don't know so much, right? They don't know so much. And we're looking at 42% of, in our area, the West, that's a huge, by the way, group. You'd have to sort of look at, we're going to talk about price ranges. We can't get much more specific than that, but let's say that nearly half of all buyers are first-time home buyers. There's different loan programs. You can't learn all the loan programs. You might be able to learn one or two, however. And so if you pick, I've said this before, but part of my job is to repeat myself, I think, for things that are important. You should pick a loan program I would recommend for first-time buyers. Talk to the guys at Turnkey or whoever you like and tell them that you wanted to learn about a first-time home buyer loan program so that you can discuss what the qualifications are, what the front and back ratios are, everything about it. To understand your ability to do so will give confidence in the people you're talking to that you really are a professional real estate agent. That doesn't mean you need to do loans, but they assume you understand loans. Right? If you're working with first-time home buyers, you might want to set up a Google alert on FHA loans. Remember I talked about Google alerts? You ought to set up, you could create a Google alert on first-time home buying tips. That alert will bring in, you'll be deluged with information. But my recommendation is you need to understand FHA, right, for first-time home buyers. You need to understand that. What are the differences between an FHA loan and a conventional loan, and how do they affect someone's ability to qualify? More from the NAR. First-time and repeat buyers by household type. 54% of first-time buyers were married couples. But single females were the next largest group, 21% first-time home buyers. There is actually a niche of single female buyers. You're going to see, even when it comes to repeat buyers, single females up as a significant percentage. Some of you might want to focus on single females. I'm just as your marketing. I'm just saying. I couldn't help myself. Repeat married couples were 71%. Single females were 16%. There are real estate agents that you're going to find that are targeting that niche. I'm just what else did I bring up here? Where are they now? We're going to talk more about this when we get to the part about finding buyers. 42% of all buyers are renting, according to the NAR. 47% had owned a previous. 77% of first-time buyers are renting. Can you get lists of people that are renting? The answer is yes. If you don't know where to get a mailing list, you could Google search, how do I find a mailing list for apartment renters, or Wholesale Mailing List is the company that I used to use. All right. Can you get people that are renting homes? If you go to Realist and you search for non-owner occupied within a given area, they'll give you a list of people that own homes but do not have them listed as for their taxes, for property taxes. That usually means they're being rented out. You could mail them a postcard, invite them to a home buying seminar. So we know where they are. 19% of parents are relatives. All right. What's the last one I hear? Primary reasons. I think it's important. I think it's a good idea for you to look at that home buying, the profile of home buyers and sellers for 2011. Most professions spend a lot of money on market research, and they pay attention to it. Real estate agents generally don't pay attention to it. Right? They don't really pay attention to market research. But why do first-time buyers buy a home? 60% was a desire to own a home of my own. As we go down the list, 11% said affordability. 7% is a change in family situations, people that get married, for example. And I'll talk about Facebook later, but the reason why I'm mentioning this is because you ought to target your marketing towards the reasons that they say they want to buy a house. We'll take a look at that a little bit later. That was all I want to do with that. All right. Anyhow, you ought to have a niche. It could be first-time home buyers, investors, condos. We really don't have any waterfront here. You can specialize in more than one category. The smaller your specialization, the bigger your business. I feel like talking about that for a second. I'm going to Google images, long tail, and I like this one. I don't know why, but I always like this one. So the long tail, the number of results is up here. More generic is over here. More specific is over there. So using us for a context, real estate, let's say if I wanted to have a website and I'm looking for the keywords real estate, well, you'll find that lots of people type in real estate or searches that have the words real estate in them. However, so the number of results is huge, but the chances that any of them are going to work with me are pretty small, right? Because they might not even be in the United States. They may not be in California. They may not be in Silicon Valley. They might be looking for God knows what. So California real estate, that's less searches, right? So that number drops. It's a little more specific, but still probably not going to help me. Better chance. San Jose real estate. Well, we're getting closer, right? There's still a lot of searches, but they may be looking, the chances are better, but still kind of remote. You're going to see that there are hundreds of thousands of this. It's a ridiculous number of people that have searches that fits into. Many times real estate agents will, and this is getting into internet marketing, but will want the keyword Silicon Valley real estate, and virtually nobody searches for that. We might say we're in Silicon Valley, but people do not type into Google Silicon Valley real estate hardly ever, right? Campbell, yes. San Jose, a lot. So as we go down, how about Blossom Valley? I'm using that as an example because I used to farm there. Blossom Valley, San Jose, California. Notice how the string is getting longer each time, right? The actual search phrase is getting longer. What that does is it reduces the number of people that are going to be searching for it, but my chances are getting higher and higher that they might want to work with me. Condos, Blossom Valley, San Jose, California. Now we're getting even a narrower band. McCune Condos, 95123, or Blossom Valley, San Jose, California. Now we're getting, you understand, we may only get 10 people every couple of weeks that are searching that. They are interested in something, right? You understand? So you get the idea that the more specific, the more likely you are to get business. It's almost impossible for you to say, I work with anybody everywhere, I don't care, right? Do you understand? You have to run TV ads in order to reach people with that kind of a message. Right? That's Pepsi, right, can do that. Because they would sell Pepsi to anybody, anywhere, at any time. But for us, the more specific we are, the more likely we are to get results. That's what we mean by specialization, right? If you know a lot of, the smaller your specialization, the bigger your business, right? If you specialize in Cambrian condos, all right, that's better than Cambrian, because Cambrian is 2 zip codes, and it's very hard for you to become an expert. 95124 condos, you could become an expert at that. You could look at all the homes that come on the market, right? That also means if you start doing that, you'll know the ones that have sold. You will have seen the insides of them. When you're walking around with a buyer, you can say that one was on the market and closed just 3 weeks ago. It had and when they realize that you've actually been inside and seen it, the chances that they want to work with you is going to go up dramatically. You understand this? This is an important point, Because one of the mistakes that I think new agents make is that they refuse to specialize because they're afraid that by doing so they'll prevent themselves from getting business they otherwise would want. But the reality is they end up not getting anything, right? So if your doctor said to you, right, you needed to have eye surgery, and the doctor pulled up his planner and he says, eye surgery, well, let's see. Brain surgery is on Mondays. I deliver babies on Tuesdays. I'm a podiatrist on Wednesday. Eye surgery, yeah, Thursday morning, you wouldn't use that doctor, right? If you're going to have eye surgery, you want your doctor to be an eye surgeon. If you want a lawyer, you'd want the lawyer to specialize in the area that you needed, right? That's more professional. Pick an area of specialization. You can add more later. Of course, you'll want to work with people who do not happen to fall in your area of specialization, but you want to establish yourself as an expert in one or two areas that you're passionate about. One of the things that we'll probably talk about is how you can put together e-agency. You get two websites, right? E-Edge is sort of a business site. E-agency, a lot of agents that I talk to say, I have no idea why I have two websites. I don't know what to do with the other website. I don't know what to do. That e-agency site, which is very customizable, could be made as a site for a specific specialization. I can show you how to do that. So what I'd like you to do is take a minute and think about this. I always ask agents, and people hire me to do consulting. I always say, what do you want to be known for? What kind of property do you want to sell? Right? And this is very related. Think about this for a couple of minutes. And since we have enough for four, we have four people. I would like you to be able to discuss this with each other. You know Susan? Georgia? Kai? Arvin? This is when I get a short break. Do we have any? Sorry to interrupt. Oh, single females. Yeah. I don't know. All right. Does anybody have any ideas about geographic areas? Okay. I'm just powering through. All right. So everybody blurt them out at once. Anything geographic areas? Santa Cruz Mountains. I guess I knew you have to live there to understand it, you know. Learn about wells, septic tanks, and all the other fun stuff. Any others? Let me make a comment. Wells and septic tanks. Like I grew up in a house in the Santa Cruz Mountains that had a well and a septic tank. This is a different world, right? You know, I grew up in a house that had, at one time we had 30 acres, and one time, one point, a lot more than that. This is a different world, isn't it? Right? I mean, this is you need to know about septic inspections, percolation rates, and all sorts of other interesting things. Right? You know, well testing, and it's hard for an agent who does nothing but normal tract residential sales to go up in those mountains and handle a sale effectively. It's very difficult, right? Because it's a different world, right? And since she lives up there and understands that, it gives her a niche, right? That would be hard for other people. Plus, the hill folk like it that you live up there. That's actually true. You know, when you tell people you've grown, like for me, I'd listed homes up in Boulder Creek and some of those Bonnie Doon and places like that, but I grew up in the mountains up there, and so it was easier, right? It was easier. Any others?
I probably live with fires. I don't live with fires too much. I still be specializing in a geographic area, and that's the case because there's definitely a certain amount of fires in the
Right. Well, sometimes even if you're working with buyers exclusively, right, which is not a bad way to start, but eventually you'll move from that. Geographic specialization is still important. Buying a house downtown is different than buying a house in Cambridge, right? The issues are different. Buying a townhome or a condominium, the issues are very different. Right, you need to understand homeowner associations and how all that works. And so it's still possible to specialize. Plus, people are oftentimes looking for a geographic area because of some draw. Maybe it's the school districts, maybe it's the location of downtown. As an example, people want to live downtown. Usually it's why they're there, not for the schools, right? You know, but in other areas it's for the schools or the affordability and knowing the market. You can't know all the markets. Right, but learning downtown that you could become good at, and the issues are different. Right, you know, selling homes that have unpermitted work. Right, downtown that's like everything seems like unpermitted work. You know, and the issues are very different than buying a home in Blossom Valley. All right, so. Do your market research. We're going to spend some time on this today. I'm going to give you some examples. To be an expert professional real estate agent that your buyers can rely on, have local market statistics at your fingertips. They're going to need this expertise to make informed decisions. The numbers don't lie. Isn't that what they always say? Figures don't lie, but liars can figure. That's always the problem with that. By providing facts, you will pave the way for a smoother offer process because your buyers will be a smoother offer process because your buyers will be less likely to want to make low-ball offers. Oh, does that ever happen? Do people have misinformation? Right? There's always like an uncle or somebody that they know says, you know, always offer 20% less. Right? You know, you never know. They might take it, right? Once you have a job, be sure market statistics, list to price to sales ratios. What I want to do is wander off now, sort of. This is the MLS, right? I've logged into Matrix. And one of the things, remember we were talking about spending 30 minutes to an hour today studying the market. By the way, you ought to go on the board tours. I know, right? I know. All right, you know, you spend a few bucks, you get some donuts and coffee. You get to hear from every affiliate in the world. There's a guy at the Blossom Valley tour that actually sold cemetery plots. And he had joined as an affiliate member and would show up at the tour. He said he was in the real estate business, right? And that everybody was a potential customer, right? He was funny, right? But you understand, you ought to, because then you at least get to hear from different lenders and they'll pitch loan programs. And if you heard one that fit your niche and you asked that loan agent, would they be happy to spend time explaining it to you, right? Plus you get to look at some homes very quickly. Misery loves company, right? But you also, what we're going to do is, there's two different places where you can look. There's market reports, which isn't so good. These are the old stuff, all right? And there is, the best ones are here under stats. And what I want to do is just give you an idea of, remember what we're looking for, according to our Ignite. I'm getting rid of that one. List price to sales price ratios. So that's a statistic, and the idea here is that it gives us a gauge of how the market is. Notice it says average days on market and sale to list price ratio. Boy, those sound pretty good. That sounds, so that if we highlight this, notice the button generate has come up. We pick on single family residence. Now, we need area, county, city, or zip. Pardon me? 20? Area 23, the Santa Cruz Mountains. Los Gatos, Santa Cruz Mountains, of course. Of course, this is going to be the one that has the worst numbers, right? Always. People always, when I do this and I take requests, they're always the ones with the worst numbers. Now, one of the things that you can do is if you look at customize, it gives you different time frames, different kinds of statistics. Now, if we click on this, we get more choices than we got from the presets. For example, I kind of think that combining those two together, it looks sort of weird because it has average days on market, which is one type of a graph, plus the list to sales price ratio. I don't know. Sometimes this is sometimes confusing enough. So the way I would get rid of the second one, notice it says days to sell average. That's the average days on market. I could select none as a secondary statistic. So you can customize this. And it's grouped by month, but it could be broken down by other characteristics. For example, price range, right, which might be an interesting one. What we're going to do, month. We're just going to break it down by month. Single family, area 23, we hit generate, and it gives us a graph. Now, this graph, it looks like a bad EKG, I think, you know. This is when they're, but if you want to, sometimes this doesn't help, but if you want to, if you click on data, it's going to show you the numbers. So what it's saying is that in April, on average, 94.2% of what was the price listed for is what the sales price was. These numbers, you have to understand, don't tell necessarily the whole story. So if I list it at 600,000, and then I lower it to 590, and then I lower it to 575, and then I lower it to 550, and then somebody makes an offer for 550, it's going to say 100%. Right? Do you understand? That's what it's going to say. They're not going to say, well, actually, you know, they started at 600,000, right? So it's not based on original list price. It's based upon the list price at the time the offer was made. Right? You just need to know that, right? So that means these numbers are probably slightly higher. But it shows that in 23 that people are getting above 90% consistently of whatever it was listed for. Now, how could you use this when counseling a buyer?
You know what, we'll offer it, probably not going to
Well, whose uncle said you always offer 20% less, right? Or 15% less, or whatever. They're not going to get the house. And we're going to talk about finding motivated buyers. But and some people have to lose a house in order for it to sink in. They just the pain. They move. Some buyers move at the speed of pain, right? And so, what other statistics could we have? Look at this list. There's a whole bunch of fun things. Let's go back to the presets. By the way, you could save this, which I'm not going to do. But average days on market to sale to list price ratio. If I click on this one again. If I click on search, if you don't mind, can I pick how about 14? Area 14, Cambrian. If you go over here to this little icon and you click on it, this is going to pull up. If you click on home counties and you click on Santa Clara County and then you go through and San Jose. And here are the numbers of all the different areas in San Jose. It's a fair question. And sometimes it can be more specific when you're looking, for example, a lot of the areas only make sense to us, and I say that generously because it doesn't always make sense to me, right? You know, whether or not I've had homes that were listed in Willow Glen that were really not in Willow Glen, and homes that were in Willow Glen that were not listed as being in Willow Glen. It doesn't always make tremendous sense, and the people, the civilians, don't necessarily use our codes, right? But zip codes is something people can understand. But that's something, and you need to watch out for this, because if you start talking to people about Alum Rock versus Berryessa, and they don't necessarily know what we're talking about, right? You understand? Because that's another area where it's sort of gray, right? I usually just would say North Valley, you know, because right. So those are the different areas, and this is going to change by area. So what I'm going to do, if I were you, I would spend some time looking at these, right, and practicing on them. Let's talk about one of the ones that I like is sales by price range. Well, I'll do 23. Why not? You've got me. 23, sales by price range. We hit generate. And what this does is it shows the number of sales in the last year. And by the way, in customize, we could change how far back we wanted that to go. All right, that's just the default is the past 12 months, complete months, but we could go back for entire years, past 3 years, past 5 years. And the idea here is it would show us where the different price ranges are. Now, the mountains, Los Gatos Santa Cruz Mountains, is not as useful in terms of targeting, but let's say, let me go back. What I mean by that, I'll show you what I mean by that. Let me go back to search, and I'm going to put in 14, which is going to give us more standard information. So in Cambrian, 400 to 600,000 is where most of the business is. Now, if you could target those homes, you understand my suggestion used to be to go where the properties are selling. For example, if you look, you'll find that there are certain areas where the days on market are really low. The percentage of a list price to sales price is very high, which means that if you get a listing, it's going to sell. There are some other areas, even now, where the listings aren't selling as well, right? And I'm just saying if you're going to farm, you'd probably want to plant in fertile ground. Average days on market and sales to list price ratio, let's look at this one. What I'm going to do, I always like to click on customize, because this gives me the two different ones. Let me just see what happens if I do this. And I hit generate. My settings are incomplete. Isn't that right? They only let me. So we want to do is days to sell average is the average days on market. And we're doing Cambrian still, remember? We're doing Cambrian. And we get the chart that's hard to read. We click on data, and it tells us the actual average days on market. That's not entirely accurate either. Right? There's a different, we used to be able to get this in the other matrix, in the other search, not the pro MLS search, not the matrix search. It was called continuous days on market. And what the difference is that let's say I list the home with a lawn canal. It's on the market for 6 months. It doesn't sell. I then list the home with Keller Williams, lower the price, right? You kept arguing with the lawn canal agent that the price was right. And then you, rather than admitting that the price was too high, you list it with another office, right, another agent, and for 3 months, and it then sells in how many days was that house on the market, right? Well, they'd say 2 months, but it really was on the market a lot before that, right? That's continuous days on market, which you can't really get here. So when it comes time to make an offer on the house, however, you could easily figure that out by doing a complete agent, the everything search that includes the history, right? And by the way, when I would show property, I know I'm wandering around on this, but when I would show property, you have the client report that you give to them. I would print out the everything report that includes all the history, and I would study it, because what I wanted to be able to do is say, well, this home was on the market before. Last year they put it on at this price, and this is what happened to it. In other words, when you are able to talk about that, they think, they being the client, that this comes from personal knowledge rather than the fact that you printed out a report from the computer and read it that morning. Right? Remember, what trumps experience? Market knowledge. So if I tell you that I've been in the business for 40 years and yet somebody else seems to know more about what's going on, you're going to go with the person who knows what's going on rather than the person who says they've been in the business the longest.
Does that sell, does that go up to closing? Or what does that mean?
It means until an offer was made that was accepted. Okay. Not closing. And when they look at the day the offer was made, that changed the status to pending. Okay. But they only look at ones that closed. Obviously, 46 days is not enough time. This would have to be all cash buyers, right, with no contingencies in order to meet that. So what they do is they look at from the time it was listed until an offer was made and accepted, which does close. All right, what was that time period? Look what it was back 77 days, all right, back in September of last year. 46 days. Can you understand? Notice you can export this as a comma separated value file, which means you can make your own graphs and charts if you know anything about Microsoft Excel. If you're lazy like me and you don't want to make your own graphs and charts, there's a program which I may have mentioned called DuckLink. Did I mention DuckLink before? DuckLink is a program, and what I've installed it on this computer, and what DuckLink does, it's a screen capture program. So when I do this and click on it, it has now captured that image, which I could save as a file, copy it to the clipboard, print out, so I could use this as a report or something. DuckLink. DuckLink. Yeah. If you just type in DuckLink, it's ducklink.com. This is a free program. Right? And so now I have a chart without having to learn Excel. And if you're good at Excel, you can make your own charts. Oops. By exporting the data as a comma separated value file. So what do we have here? I always start with the presets. Days to sell over time, and we're still doing, I'm not sure that just provides a slightly different looking chart. Listings by price range shows us what's on the market right now. Months of inventory, this is a 3-year average. Days of unsold inventory. What this says, just so you understand it, and it's telling us that right now in April there's 2.3 months. And I believe in Shift it talks about the different, what's a buyer's market or a seller's market. If there's less than 3 months of inventory, it's a seller's market. There's different opinions about this too. Now what this means, unsold 2.3 months, is given the level of our current sales, and you can figure this out by taking how many sales there were in a given month versus how many new listings there were in a given month and doing division. But basically what we're saying is if we stopped listing homes, right, if they passed a law that said nobody in Cambrian can put their homes on the market anymore, and all we did is sell the ones we have in 2.3 months, there'd be no more listings. All right, there were times when we had 9 months of unsold inventory to a year of unsold inventory. Right? This is a seller's market. Can you understand why this is an important thing to be able to explain to buyers? Because sometimes they read about things that are happening in other parts of the United States. April 2012, there was 147 active pending and closed 64. Now, what I used to do with these numbers is I would take the 64 and divide by the 147 to find out what percentage 64 was of 147. And what that percentage did is it would tell me what percentage, and by just looking at it, we're looking at more than a third, right, that are under contract. And the way I would explain this to people is, of all the for sale signs that are up in Cambrian, with this, and there's 147 for sale signs, 64 of them are closing each month. Right. So that ratio of closed to active, right, is I don't know. Sales price over time. You get the. I'm not going to go through every one of these, but you get the idea. What I wanted you to understand, first of all, this is here. How that you can customize that you can get the data, and that you can export it as a comma separated value file. These other statistics, which are under market reports, this one is just called, let's say we're going to do single family, we'll do 23 just for fun. A date range, 01 to 012 plus. How about that was wrong? That was entirely wrong. And sold, set criteria, and this is a different report. These are the older ones, and you get to watch up. They used to be called Pong. Only older people would know that. The game Pong. And so what this does is that it broke it down, the sold. I don't know how useful this was for 23, but it showed that there weren't that. I don't understand. That one doesn't. Wow. Yeah.
I don't know anything about the MLS. Would there be a good class to take for tutorials under your
for the MLS, what I would recommend that you do, first of all, the multiple listing service, Pro MLS, has a YouTube channel, and they post videos on their YouTube channel all the time. And I always watch their video tutorials, and they have a lot of them. And if you click on video tutorials, you're going to see a lot of them. They hold free classes, many of which are webinared. And if you click on this folder that says tutorials, they have watch video tutorials. And I would have to look for their YouTube channel, but let's see where this takes us. YouTube, there it is. And by the way, this is a free suggestion. I've installed, this is my how to learn anything quickly, right? This is what this falls under the category, how to learn anything quickly. So what I do is I've installed a program. They have them for Firefox. They have them for all the browsers. This is Chrome I'm using right now that has this download button. You type in YouTube downloader. So if I click on this, what it's going to allow me to do is download it to my computer, the file. Don't do this, Georgia, at home, right? And because it takes bandwidth. Don't do it at the office, but it takes bandwidth. And then I use a program called VLC, and VLC is a program to play videos. You see this, it looks like that. It's got that little tone. And the thing that VLC will do that I like is it will allow me to speed up the video, right? So I can keep increasing the speed until I'm understanding everything the guy's saying. But because sometimes they start off like they're from Louisiana, and that's, you know, but by the time they're done, the guy sounds like he's from Brooklyn, right? You know, you know. And sometimes it's at double speed, and I can understand everything they're saying. And you can stop it and pause it. So if you go to they have 33 videos, which you can download and watch at your convenience.
They also have classes in SCORE.
They also have classes, but you know, you have to drive there, and I don't know. Anyhow, that was enough about that. We're going to take a average days on market in different price ranges. Number of homes on the market in different price ranges. I've showed you how to do all that, right? You understand that shouldn't be too difficult. Price trends. Are prices going up or going down? Market trends. Now, this, you may have to talk to people. Listen to agents that are actually closing transactions. Are sellers paying down points? The answer is no, by the way, to the first one. Are they paying closing costs? Not so much. Not now. Are multiple offers common? The answer is yes, right? But this is anecdotal. Have you heard the ready, aim syndrome? Well, preparation, action is essential. Don't fall in the trap of spending too much time preparing instead of doing. This is, by the way, a good example. After you schedule a showing, poll the prices on active, pending, and sold homes in the vicinity so you can point them out to your buyers as you drive through the neighborhood. They know that the ones that have signs in front of them you're aware of, but when you can point to them the ones that sold, right, and describe them, that's when they think you know what you're doing. So we have to fool them. Talk like a buyer-focused professional. Average days on market. The reality is we have to evaluate each home you like and decide if it is the home for you, whether it has been on the market for a day or a year. A great home always sells, and it usually sells fast. So while the average days on market is 46, that number does not represent all the homes because some of them sit on the market for a lot longer, and some of them sell in one day. What I would always tell buyers is the best ones sell fast. If a home has been on the market for 2 months, what conclusion would you draw about that home in this market? Something is wrong, right? Do you understand? Because nobody really wants leftovers, right? Unless they're looking for a bargain, right? The person who says, I want to come in low, they need to look at homes that have been on the market for a really long time. Right? You understand? If somebody says, I want a low ball, then let's only look at homes that have been on the market for a year or more, or 9 months or 6 months, or something like that, because the good buys, the good deals are going to sell quickly, and there'll be multiple offers. Right? Nobody wants leftovers, isn't that right? Right? Are all of the buyers that looked at this home before wrong? Right? You understand? They probably aren't all wrong. And by the way, that's a good reality because what they need is an agent who knows and understands what they're looking for, who's on it and is checking all the time for them, and that's going to, when they find a good deal, call them and tell them, I found a home, we need to look at it today. Because what they want to be able to do is to make an offer on it before somebody else does. Right? They want to have a shot at it, their dream home, and that means they can't afford to wait. List price to sales price. The average list price in Cambrian is, but the average sales price is this. That means that sellers are coming down approximately that many dollars. The reason I share this information is so that I would prefer to turn you down now rather than disappoint you later if you think you could offer $25,000 less than the list price and actually get it. I would prefer to turn you down now rather than disappoint you if you think and actually expect to get it. So let me ask you a very direct question. If we found you the perfect home and the seller is only willing to come down about, how would you feel about that? This is what you would say to somebody who says, I want to offer 20% less. Or I was told, sometimes they get told to offer $10,000, $20,000 less. Somebody, they just, I don't know. Unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation. If your list price is better than the average agent's, this is if you're a seller. Local information, school district information. Know your school districts inside and out. Again, this is why a lot of people don't do well in real estate. Right? Because what we're really talking about is spending a lot of time learning stuff. Like an hour a day studying the market and local information. Right? Remember? An hour a day. Right? You could easily do this. You should know where the best school rankings are. And by the way, one of the things that I used to do was I would take the API scores and then I'd compare the average sales price. And I would do division to figure out what would be, and by the way, what I also would do is I'd find out what the average square feet is. I'd have to look and see how I could do that. Those of you, this may be too geeky, right? Is it okay for me to do something really geeky? You mind something really geeky? All right, so this is geeky, I have to admit. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a search. And you can only export 500. So you can't do San Jose. But let's say we're going to do Cambrian. And I'm picking Cambrian just because I want to. And what I want to do is I'm going to pick single-family homes, and I'm going to do, I always like to use the status change date as a search criteria rather than close of escrow date, list date, or sale date. Because what that'll do is show the last change in the status of the listing. So let's say we're going to do 01, 01 to 012 and plus. All right, and so 266 matches, that's under 500. Now, what I would then do, and this is really geeky, so I apologize already for those of you that are going to say, I really don't want to do all this. So I click on results, and one of the choices is export. Because what I want, this doesn't really tell me right now, so I click on export. And it's going to ask me, these are the different ones that are by default, and the one I want is in here. So what I would do is I would go to My Matrix, open that up in a new tab. Will it let me do that? Maybe it won't let me do that. Sometimes they don't let you open things in new tabs. My Matrix. All right, we'll go back. You have to think about this in advance. You go to My Matrix, you go to Settings, you go to Custom Exports. what you do is you add an export. And let's say this is Mike's buyer one, right? So you call it something. And then you go through and you pick out, there's 130 some different ones. And what, and I don't want to spend all my time on this, but let's say I want to do, I'm building square feet. I'm just going to do a couple things. And sale price. And you can spend some time on this. And what I'm going to do, I just want to explain what I'm going to do, is I'm going to figure out, because I now know what the building square feet is and the sales price is for 14, I can divide and figure out what the average dollars per square foot is. And then I'm going to compare that to API scores. And so the idea is that I'm going to be able to match, given a specific school ranking, for schools in this band, where is your best deal when buying a house? You understand? If you want this kind of a school that has this API ranking, where is the least dollars per square foot? This is super geeky. I admit that. But once you get the idea, you see, once I've done this, it's going to save that export. All right, and when I click on save, it's going to save it. And now I might want to, right now I'm just doing this as an analysis. I could add, you notice I can make this look like anything I want. Now one of the differences, so let me just do this. I'm going to save this. And I'm going to go back to our search. And I'm going to go to I'm going to go back to this, and I'm going to do 14 status change date 01. How about that one? And I want to do single family homes, and I want solds, and that's 63. I hit results. This comes down here. I go to export. Mike's buyer one. There it is. I click on export, and it's a comma-separated value file, but that's my only choice. I hit save. I wait for this to be done, and now I have one of the choices that I forgot to make is there's a box to click that says include field headers, right? Which is a good box to include, because then it would say square feet, building square feet, and it would say sales price. I'm doing this fast because I didn't want to over geek you guys today. But so what I would then do is I would say this equals that divided by this, right? So that's $262. That was the formula, right? I said, does everybody get that?
Yeah, that's the townhouses, so that was the difference in single family. I think you want a townhouse.
Well, I apologize for that, but you get the idea. So what I did was, this is sales price and this is the square footage. So I clicked equals sales price divided by the square footage, and that gives us dollars per square foot, right? And then when I highlight it for one and I drag it down, they're all there. And so that's what all of them were. And then at this point, I simply go over here to data, to formulas, and I hit auto sum, or how about average, and I hit enter, and that tells me the average of that column is $262, and it goes into, and if I wanted to change that because I have ADD and I don't like it to have that many decimals, I say, for example, currency, 2 decimal places. Okay, now it looks more like numbers. So the idea is that would it be of value to you to be able to have a discussion with the buyer as to, of the good school bands, which areas they're going to get the most home for their money, given that as a criteria. Yes, because that's what buyers, a lot of them don't know, but they want, schools is important, right? They want good schools. So the idea is, well, Cupertino has good schools. Is it expensive? Expensive to live there. Yeah. Ooh. Yeah. Real expensive. Ouch. Right? Isn't that? So given, did you understand at some point you're going to be confronted with this because you figure out what they can afford. But if you could tell people this is where you get the best deal given the school. Your buying power to school ranking is highest here. I'm just saying this is I found that being good at these numbers and being able to do this helped, right? You understand? It helped. And notice I could edit my custom export right now since I created it. And the thing that I didn't do is include the label right here. You see that? Include column names. I had none. I could label them, I could include the names, and then it would, you know. What was it that Gary Keller said? Market knowledge trumps experience, right? And so being able to have the, see, what you're going to learn when you're in the business is you're going to eventually figure it out. Where, and for somebody who's really interested in good schools, where they're going to be able to buy the most house. All right. Well, that was.
Safety scores of the area.
Well,
School district, but maybe that particular area where they can get the best deal.
Well, safety scores is a different thing. There, it's usually done by zip codes, and sometimes correlating that to schools is to school boundaries is more difficult. As a general rule, the better the schools are, the safer the areas. That's not a perfect ratio, but almost, right? Very few great schools are in bad neighborhoods, by definition. But you should know the school districts inside and out. Right? You should know how to identify whether or not a house is in a school district. It oftentimes involves making a phone call because sometimes one side of the street's in a different school district. And the boundaries that you see online are not accurate. What's in the MLF, not accurate. Not always. Right? And who are they going to be mad at if they can't go to the right school after they told you? Right? And the buyer material issues, those of you that heard David Hammerslaw talk, the buyer material issues, that's a form we used to tell people to use because if you need to find out what their dominant buying motive is. I'm going to talk more about this in a later class. Dominant buying motive, right? That's related to this. If schools, some people will sacrifice everything for the right school district. They want a 5-bedroom house, but they'll take a 3. Right? So they'll put bunk beds if they can get into the right school district. Safety sometimes is a different issue. Single women buyers, I can remember one agent saying, well, I didn't want to show her this townhouse because the homeowner association dues were high. And my recommendation was to talk to the client about her dominant buying motive. There's a correlation between the amount of homeowner association dues and the safety of the complex, right? And the amenities that the complex has. As a general rule, the more you pay in homeowner association dues, the safer the place is to live. It's a general correlation. And the idea is that you may not want to live there with the homeowner association dues that high, but you need to find out what your client's dominant buying motive is, because they probably have an exercise facility, they probably have a lot of other amenities, they're probably a very secure facility. That's why they have high homeowner association dues, right? Local resources, put yourself in the buyer's shoes. Would you want to know about the area that you're moving to? Probably. You should, title companies are not be prepared to send them your business in exchange for promotional materials. They don't give us a lot of promotional materials, but a lot of the information, I wouldn't think about title companies so much, but a lot of the information you can get from Realist or from, in other words, demographic information and things like that. We're not interested in giving that information to people. Let me make sure this is clear. As a real estate licensee, we're not supposed to steer buyers to given neighborhoods based upon race, color, creed, sex, national origin, or ancestry. However, having said that, some buyers want to be steered. Right? You understand? That you have to find out what they want to be near a Ranch 99. They want to be in a particular neighborhood, and so that type of what we need to be is the source of the source, right? In other words, you could say these are some websites where you can go to and you can find out that kind of information. Yeah. No, you're not supposed to tell them what the demographics of the area are. You're supposed to tell them to go find out. But you need to be careful. There was an actual court case where a real estate agent was sued, and but not successfully. And the buyers were African American, and they bought a house in a neighborhood, and then when their kids went to school, they found out that they were virtually the only children of color that were in the school. And their view was, had they known that, they wouldn't have bought that house. And they sued the agent for not telling them. And the court ruled the agent wasn't allowed to tell them, right? That's how it came out. So you're not supposed to, this is called steering. It violates several federal, state, and the Department of Real Estate regulations. So, but all this information is on the internet, right? It's all there. And you can send them links and let them do all the steering they want, right? Let them do the research and tell you what areas they're interested in. But you're not supposed to give people a demographic breakdown of an area, even if asked. But you can tell them where to get it. Okay? It's a crazy thing, right? Because steering can be bad, but a lot of buyers want to be steered, right? And the reality is that most real estate agents show people where they want to be seen the property. So if you ask them to tell you what they're looking for and where they want to be, you're supposed to show them those properties. But there's you understand, it's a fine line. Customize your buyer's guide. A buyer's guide, a professional buyer's guide would differentiate you from many other agents. I talk about listing buyers. If you were going to list a seller, would you have a listing presentation? Right? Would you a planned presentation? See, what I find, sometimes people say, well, I've tried getting people to sign buyer broker agreements and they won't sign. It doesn't work. People won't sign them. I know I've tried. They won't sign them. I doubt they've really tried correctly, right? You understand? If I walked into a seller's house and I said to the seller, look, before I talk to you about anything, you're going to have to sign the listing agreement. I'm not going to discuss. Why should I tell you what owns the business? Why should I do anything? Sign the listing agreement and then we'll talk, right? That isn't going to work, right? Is it? So the way we do a listing presentation is first we build rapport. We say, give me a tour in the house. Oh, that's nice. Is that a picture of your dog? We qualify. We ask them questions, find out what their wants and needs are. We show that we can do something. That's our presentation. Oh, let me show you how I work with me. And then we ask them to sign the listing agreement, right? But when buyers are involved, agents just flip that around. And they'll say, well, you wouldn't work without an agreement from your company to be paid, would you? Would you? How long would you work if they weren't going to pay you? You wouldn't work at all, would you? So I'm not going to work for you unless you sign. That's, in my opinion, not going to work, right? You understand? That's not going to work. So make a presentation first. right? Build rapport. Hey, how you guys doing? How long have you lived in the area? You know, got any kids? What are their ages? You know, when do you plan on buying a home? You've been renting it, you know, got family in the area, you know, build rapport, qualify them, ask them questions, and then show them how working with you is going to get them the best deal possible. And you have to communicate what's in it for them. All right? We all know what's in it for us if we get them to sign a buyer broker agreement, but not every agent requires it, and they could easily find one that won't. What's in it for them? If you cannot articulate why it's to their advantage to have a buyer broker agreement, you're going to have trouble getting people to sign them. Right? And by the way, when you get busy, it gets a lot easier to get people to sign them. So, components, E-Edge, buyer broker. Does everybody know how to find this stuff on kw.com? Maybe. kw.com. All right, we're going to go back to, I'm going to go home. All right. And sign in again. How far? How much? All right, so you go to marketing. How about market my business? And this looks useful, doesn't it? Marketing to my sphere of influence. Marketing, how about this? Marketing to buyers. We click on that. Buyer's guide, they have instructions. They have one on distressed property. When you're first-time home buyers, wow. And what you can do is if you click on this, you can get a buyer consultation package, which is a PowerPoint presentation, which I already have, that you can then download. And let me pull one up. This is a customizable one. And so this is not rocket surgery, right? You know? If you don't like this, this is PowerPoint, which is a little unwieldy, but it's a good, PowerPoint is an easy way to put in graphs and things like this. So you can put in your company slogan if you have one, prepared for, compliments of.
No, they don't have one for land. I had to modify that whole PowerPoint presentation.
Well, that's because that's a problem with being in the mountains. Yeah, well, there's less pre-designed stuff. Land, it doesn't, because if somebody's interested in buying the land, it's like, well, how many bedrooms? Oh, that's not right. How many? So what this is, a mortgage just thinks about the loan process, and we're not going to go through everything here, but there are things that you can. This is a customizable one. Home search notes. We're going to go through the process, but what you ought to do is you got to take a look at this. Right, and there's instructions, and if you go down here, look at all this stuff. Postcards, letters, emails, downloads for investors, move-up buyers, renters, and first-time home buyers. If we click on that, we're going to see shift renters. This is another Microsoft PowerPoint. Word. This one's Word, excuse me. And this just discusses the different kinds of campaigns for first-time home buyers that use E-Edge for. So what you are going to want to do is the buyer guide in PowerPoint using what is this? That one I think is just a description of how to use PowerPoint. So the idea is that you download this. Does everybody have PowerPoint? If you don't, you can upload the PowerPoint to Google, and it'll convert it into a format. You can download a program called OpenOffice which will open up PowerPoint for free. So what you really want to do is put together a buyer consultation package. You ought to customize it. And we're going to talk more about that. I have some samples, by the way. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag them into a folder that I've got on my Google Docs. You'll get it in the next email. But I'm dragging all of my PowerPoint presentations, and I have a bunch of stuff. I had a much longer one that I had done, which I'm going to put there. I'm going to put all my old stuff in the folder so you can look at it, but and add things, including a list of services that I would provide and all that sort of stuff, right? Doesn't that sound like fun? But what we're going to do, there are 3 classes on buyers, right? Today, tomorrow, and Friday. And so what we're doing here, this is a prepare to work with buyers, right? And this, by the way, gives you a good structure for a home. Let me make sure everybody understands this. What you're looking for with buyers is to get them to come into the office for a free home buying consultation. Your marketing, your emails, your advertising, what you see on the phone, your close, what you want is for them to come into the office, CITO, come into the office for a free home buying consultation. And when you get them here, you should have a loan agent with you. This is my philosophy, if they haven't already talked to one. I used to talk to them first and then have them talk to the loan agent. And then the loan agent would, after I spent an hour with them, the loan agent would say, so then I'd change because I was busy. I'd have the loan agent talk to them first. And the loan agent would tell me whether or not I should talk to them for an hour or not, right? You understand? So, but that's up to you. But the idea is you need to be, and you ought to sit in on the loan agent discussion, especially when you're new, so that you learn about loans. Right? The best way for you to learn about loans is to listen to buyers ask loan agents questions about loans and for you to hear the loan agent's answers. Yeah. How do you get a loan agent to join you? If you walk out there, you're going to see business cards from Turnkey Mortgage, who is a friend of ours. And if you call them, and they're going to be doing classes, by the way, on the schedule. There's going to be a Monday, maybe next Monday. I'm not that, I don't plan in advance very well. But in a coming Monday, Turnkey is going to be doing a class on financing. You'll get to meet them. They're the ones that were here for the sales meeting. Every week, yes. Yeah.
You probably done it both ways, right? I mean, do you have one way that or the other for the client meeting loan agent first? Because I feel more comfortable when they meet loan agent first as possible before.
Yes, the question is, do you meet them first? I had gone to some seminar back in the 80s that said you talk first and didn't have a meet with a loan agent. But after like 4 or 5 times, the loan agent said they can't buy anything, and I'm busy, I decided to reverse it, to have them talk to the loan agent first. And if you get really busy and the value for you being there, at having it at the same time, is so you get a chance to learn about loans. But after a while, I didn't want to learn about loans anymore, right? You know, and so I wasn't even necessarily there when the loan agent was talking to them. And it wasn't necessarily at the same time. But that all depends on how much control you have over your buyers. You understand? Because you're not going to, some of them, getting them to come in for 1 appointment is hard. Getting them to come in for 2 appointments is much harder, right? If you get them here, it's better to do the whole thing at once, right? So I would have them talk to the loan agent first, right? And I would sit through it if possible until you can't stand it anymore, right? And you find out the loan agents ask the same questions, right? They have the same answers. After you've done it 3 or 4 times, you'll be going, no. But you see, what that does is it puts you in a position of being able to answer questions too. Without doing loans, because you can't say, I don't do loans, I don't know anything about them, you're going to have to call somebody. You can't say that to people, right? You know, not too often. All right, so you're going to want to spend some time. This is a homework assignment, right? This is preparing. You're going to want to spend some time fixing your buyer's guide. Build your buyer's guide. Some of the things that we could do is the about me. You should have a value proposition. Isn't it irritating to keep bringing up the same things over and over again? Isn't it irritating? What clients say about you. Do you have any clients that say anything about you? Some, hopefully. Right? If you don't, do you know anybody that would, generally I would start with people that owe you money, but do you know anybody that would write something that says they've known you and worked with you and that they would recommend you? Don't have to say that they knew you and worked with you in real estate. Can you find that? Social proof. And the vendor list, it's important that you understand home warranties. I'm just telling you, it's important to understand home warranties. It's important to know what is covered and what isn't covered. It's important to know which add-ons you need and which ones you do not. It's also important for you to understand the natural hazard disclosures, the JCPs. It's important that you know why would somebody want to pay extra for an environmental report. Not just what the basic cheap package is, but what are the other additions that are possible and why would somebody have them? You think you could get somebody to explain that to you? Like from any of the natural hazard disclosure companies would be happy. Does everybody know how to find them? You walk out there and you look and you pull one of the cards and you ask them. How about that book that we give to people, environmental hazards book, right? Which you give it to them and you have them sign at the back. And have you ever, like, I know this sounds ridiculous, but have you ever actually read the book, looked at the book, skimmed it? Would it be valuable for you to understand why we give them that book? And what's the deal about formaldehyde? What's radon? Right? Asbestos. Have you ever been on? I've been on asbestos inspections. The guy has the little thing looks like a Geiger counter. And by the way, there's asbestos everywhere, right? Everywhere. But would you see what my goal for you is to be able to position yourself as more than just a typical real estate agent. Because what the typical real estate agent does is nothing except drive people around to show them homes. They don't preview them first. They don't know what's the market like. In other words, they haven't done a CMA. I'm going to suggest that if you are going to show a home, you do a CMA on it, right? So that you know, is this how good? Because they're going to say, is this a good price or not? What are you going to say? Sure, I don't know. Why don't we go back to the office and we'll run the numbers? All right. So you haven't run the numbers. You don't know if it's a good price or not. So you do a CMA, you preview the properties, you understand all these different components that most real estate agents understand or pay attention to. Why would you want an environmental disclosure in addition to the basic natural hazards? What are the issues? Do you understand that there could be an abandoned gas station, a paint store? There could be environmental hazards in the area. Would they want to know about it? Now, do you understand they may opt out of doing that, but should you be in a position to explain to them all of the process involved in buying a home and what all these different things are? And the thing about this part is that this is easy to find affiliates that would be happy to sit down with you and explain it, right? Can you explain how a home warranty works, what's covered, what isn't covered? Right? You should be able to do that. Just saying, this is called preparing, right? Use the vendor list. All those flyers that are out there are people that are trying to sell stuff, but they also are a valuable source of information. Supplement your buyer's guide. create inserts that you print and include in the folder binder. I used to give people binders. I also had a tablet PC back before it was in vogue, and I had a PowerPoint presentation. Right? But I also like the binders because people like stuff. Right? They like being given stuff. Right? And then they can carry the stuff away and they can read the stuff. What we would do right now is you're going to, I would like you, whether we do it right now, because we probably aren't going to really do it right now, you need to time block activities to work on this. Right? Does everybody time block? Does everybody have a calendar program? Google Calendar? You should get a calendar program. Even, what? That's a different story, but you need to start with that. Right? The problem with being in real estate is the freedom and independence. Because freedom is a gift, not always wisely used. You understand? And if you treated this like one of the quotes that I had where the guy said that he treated it like a job. When he scheduled something, he treated it like a job where he would be fired if he didn't do it. Right? If you worked at Home Depot and you didn't show up on time, or you spent 20 or 30 minutes talking to somebody on your cell phone instead of doing what they wanted you to do, they would fire you. Right? See, that's one of the, this is why most people who go into real estate don't make it. You understand, most people don't make it because it's too easy to get into, too easy to get out of, and too optional while you're in it. And freedom is a gift not always wisely used. So you have to develop the habit of time blocking and sticking to it. What will happen is you'll start to get appointments, and you'll have more clients, and you'll start to get commission checks, and then you have to be able to connect the activities that you're time blocking to what the commission checks are going to mean to you and your life. You understand? When you can connect the studying the market to buying a car or going on a vacation, right? When you can connect those things in your mind, then you're more likely to do it. Real estate sales don't just happen. It's based upon what you do. And if you've been in the business, if you want to get different results, you have to do different things. If you keep doing what you've been doing, you'll keep getting what you've been getting. Right? That's just the way it is. And so you need to get into the habit, you need to have a calendar. Even if you don't like cell phones, a month at a glance calendar, and you need to time block when you're going to do things, and you need to try to develop the discipline to do them. Keller Williams has resources available, copies of books you can get, The Millionaire Real Estate Investor and Your First Home. Qualify and schedule buyers for the consultation. Be proactive about putting yourself in the path of buyers. Remember, initially buyers are only interested in finding and viewing homes. Make sure you offer IDX search capabilities on your website and advertise on Craigslist. I think we're going to talk about that. I did a class on Craigslist, and I have a recording of it. But by the way, if you're interested, remember this, Craigslist. Type in Craigslist. There's something called the 30-day challenge, which they run every couple of months. Not quite every 30 days, but pretty close. This is, notice Internet Leads Month was May 2012. Does everybody see that? Did you know?
Welcome to the 30-day Craigslist challenge. Thank you.
And the video is starting here. So I would spend some time watching those videos. Also, the 30-day Craigslist challenge, there's 3 videos. Notice they're about an hour long. But they're going to explain to you how to run ads on Craigslist to get leads. I'm just saying, right? And you see, and they're going to have a new challenge when it comes up. You ought to check into kw.com and you ought to look at the things that are upcoming. And when they have the next official 30-day challenge, you ought to join it. I'm just saying. All right? And IDX is the Internet Data Exchange. You have it on both eEdge and you can have it on eAgency. Whether you're seeing someone in your sphere or referral who's responding to a buyer, sign, or inquiry, someone else making a contact, you have two goals: qualify them and schedule an appointment. And as straightforward as this, buyers who are calling on properties also have two goals. They want to eliminate the property and eliminate you. Now, I've heard debates about the eliminate the property. It sort of depends. I don't want to get into the philosophy here, but the idea is that some people would say that when a buyer is wanting information on a property that they saw on the internet, they're seeking to eliminate it. My belief always was that they were looking to see if that was their dream home, right? That's what they're looking. But the process is one of elimination. So what usually happens is that it's not the dream home, right? But sometimes it is. I've had people call me about homes they saw on the internet from my site, and I showed it to them and they bought it, all right? You know, because that was their home. But with a quick call, they want to determine if the house has potential. They don't want to see it. I would still say I don't like eliminate the property. They want to see if this is their dream home, right? To me, that's more positive than the only reason they're calling you is to not do something. But this is what it says in the official book. And eliminate you. Remember I said the two things, maybe you've heard me say this, the two things that all of our clients are looking for, they're like mice. You remember that? All clients are like mice. There's two things they want. One, they want to find the cheese. They're programmed to find the cheese. A mouse will chew its way through an 1.5-inch piece of plywood to get the cheese. The second thing they're programmed to do is avoid the cat. That same mouse that would chew through the 1.5 inches of plywood will run in terror when they see a whisker at the door, right? We're the cat, right? You understand? We're the cat. The cheese is the house. They want the cheese, but they're going to try to avoid the cat. And they want to avoid salespeople. This is a natural thing, right? So how do you accomplish your goals before they accomplish theirs? By using scripts that gives buyers the information they're looking for in the property and enables you at the same time to find out enough about them and demonstrate your value. You need to practice scripts. Remember that first slide, 30 minutes to an hour a day learning about the market, 30 minutes to an hour a day practicing scripts. If you don't become smooth with the words, you're going to become very discouraged. Right, because it takes a lot of effort to get them, and then when you watch them slip away because you don't know what to say, it becomes very discouraging. It's already discouraging. NAR, the 2011 was a little bit different. It went up a little bit, but 64% of buyers interviewed only one agent. That doesn't mean they didn't meet agents, but in terms of actually what they consider to be an interview. If you can get the appointment for the consultation, you're probably going to get them to work with you unless you're really bad at it. Right? So you don't want to be bad at it. It's getting them in. Qualify. Establish control of conversation when a buyer calls by asking them price range, motivation, location, wants and needs, timeline, finances, availability. Now, remember the examples that I gave. My questions, I always ask the same questions, and I would say, what was it about this property that caught your eye? And it says that it has dog kennels. And we got a lot of dogs. And so we're looking for a house that has a built-in dog kennel. Then I would say, great, how long have you been looking for a house with dog kennels? We've been looking for that. Girl, really, you saw that many? How many have you seen? Really? Right, so I've asked them how long, what are they looking for, how long they've been looking, how many have they seen? Why didn't you buy one of those? Right, I'd always ask them that question. Well, we saw a couple that we liked. They had the right kind of dog kennels we were looking for in the right area, but somebody had already bought them. We found a problem. Right? They're not finding the homes in time for them to get into the offer process. Are you working with an agent yet? Right? If they say several, that means no. If they say yes, I'd say great. Does that mean that you have, like, signed an exclusive, you have an exclusive? You, like, signed something? I mean, are you telling me if I found you a home with the dog kennels that was in the right price range, in the right area, you're saying you wouldn't even want me to contact you? If I found you the right home, you don't even want to hear from me? Is that what you're saying? Right? Huh? You know? Usually at that, I've had people say, well, yeah, we have a friend in the business. I'd say, great. In this kind of market, you need all the friends you can get. Right? I'm not suggesting you don't work with your friend. However, if I could show you how you can get the right house at the best deal on the right house, would you be interested in hearing that? If I could show you some ways in which you could save money in buying a house in today's market, would you be interested in talking about that? It's called an opening involvement question. Right? I would ignore, everybody knows somebody in the real estate business. I would just ignore that. I would say, fine, great. I'm not saying you shouldn't work with them, but I'd get back to the point. Are you interested in talking about how to get a good deal in today's market? Right? Because we all are programmed to stall salespeople. Isn't that right? You know, can I help you? No, thanks, I'm just looking. No, you're not. Right? Not always you're there to buy something, but that's what we say. Right? So you need to be able, and do you currently rent or do you own? Right? Have you met with a lender yet? Have you had a chance to find out, based upon your expenses and the amount of cash you have available and your income, what exactly how much house you could afford to in today's market? Right? You understand? I've asked those questions so many times to people. Right? That I could go through that list again and again and again. You need to be able to do that. And if you have to start with having a list that you keep with you to ask, you need to be fluent. You need to be able to ask those questions. A, B, C, I used to mark people D for dead, but A are people that are ready, willing, and able. What does it say? Those of you who remember the real estate classes, right? Remember that? When has a real estate agent earned the commission? When they find a buyer ready, willing, and able, right? That's what they say, ready, willing, and able. And that's actually the three areas that we want to qualify people on. Are they ready, willing, and able? Some people are ready and willing but not able, right? The fortune is in the follow-up. So those people want but can't. Where should you spend most of your time with A buyers? You sometimes have to kiss a lot of frogs to find the prince, right? You understand? Sometimes you have to go through quantity. C buyers, they have no immediate need. If you find us the right house, we'd be interested, maybe thinking about buying it. Agents will kill themselves working with C buyers, showing them property, driving them around, right? You need to find more buyers. When people say, I can't find any buyers, most people, have you ever participated in the Craigslist challenge? The busy agents all say yes, by the way. Right? Busy ones all say yes. The most common thing I get when I'm coaching somebody is the what? The who? Is this a Keller Williams thing? And I'm like, have you ever logged in to the Keller Williams site? Right? They do this like every couple of months. They do this. There was one in December. There was one in January. There's going to be another one soon. You need more buyers. People who say they don't have enough buyers, how many of them are spending 3 hours a day prospecting, 5 days a week? No, none is the answer. Right? Does your goal change depending on their classification? Unless they are merely curious, your goal remains the same. You want to schedule an appointment. Sometimes you want to, people don't always tell you the truth over the phone. People that are willing to come in for an appointment generally have, they're willing, right? People that say we're ready but we won't come in aren't willing. You are unlikely to sell a house to someone you have not met with. That was a profound statement, right? If you haven't ever met them in person, you're very unlikely to sell them a home. Now, I understand that we have electronic signatures, right, and that you could email them virtual tours, and you could fill out the form. You're not going to sell somebody a home that you have not brought into the office and met with. Right? I'm just saying you're not going to sell them a home if they never come into the office and meet with you. So that's our goal. This is always what we're closing for. While it is less likely to be able to schedule an appointment with Bs and unlikely to schedule with Cs, that's one way you know that they're Cs, if you get the appointment for the consultation, you're likely to get the buyer representation agreement and the buyer representation agreement. And if you're fugitive, we're going to talk more about this, right? I'll go through. I've gotten people to sign that form, and I'll talk about how I did it. There are many variations of this. Right, but what you really want is for them to sign the California Association of Realtors. The best is the exclusive buyer-broker agreement, but even the non-exclusive one is a big advantage, one of those two. We're going to go through this. Once you've had the consultation, A buyers, if I got the sense on the phone that they were an A buyer because of their answers, I would ask them, are you available to see properties on Saturday? We're going to meet in the morning. By the way, when people say we just want to see properties, I would still tell them, let's come into the office and we're going to have a pre-showing briefing. Right? Just a little briefing before we go look, okay? Is that all right? All right? And then, oh, by the way, and I always ask them, have you had a chance to meet with a lender yet to find out based upon your income, your expenses, and the amount of cash you have available, exactly how much home you can afford? Have you done that yet? If they say yes, I would say, great, with whom? And I would find out more information, and I would ask, is it okay for me to talk to the loan agent? Because were they pre-qualified, pre-approved, right? Because we're going to need to know this. If they say, no, we haven't done that yet, I'd say, fine, we can take care of all that this Saturday morning, right? And get a loan agent to be there too. So I would, if they say, I only want to go look at homes, I would say, well, first we'll come in, we'll meet at the office, and we're going to have a briefing before we go look at homes. Right? For some reason, they'd like the word briefing.
I'm concerned about safety issues, especially some of the people up in the mountains. Should we try to get a copy of your license or something if we're going to go take them out?
That's hard for me to answer.
I work with crime victims most of my adult life, so I'm very cognizant of that.
Well, yeah, I don't know how to answer that. I've never really thought about, I mean, you could. I would always say that if they won't come into the office for a meeting, you should meet them here unless they own a home they want to sell first. Otherwise, you should meet them here, not at property. Because that's usually when things go bad. Right? And if they're here, how far you want to go with that, I can't answer that question. Right? It's not normal to ask for their driver's license before you show them homes, but you might need to get a sense of sometimes it's better to have a partner.
Like my client person that I met, he saw the listing on Craigslist and wanted to see the property, so I brought my husband with me.
Right.
I initially met him because he met me, I heard about it on Craigslist.
Right, and that's the people on Craigslist. They could be iffy. I always tell people, that there's a new website that has a list of all of the sexual deviants in any given area, and it's called Craigslist Personals. And sorry about that, but yeah, that's an issue, right? But I can't. Generally speaking, you want them to come into the office first. And you can, one of the things that you can get away with is by saying this is a company policy. I don't have a choice. Our policy is when we're showing land and things like that, come into the office first. By the way, land is a different issue, but do you think sellers would prefer that we met with people and pre-qualified them before we show them the house, or would sellers want us to show a house to anybody no matter what? What do you think? They want to be pre-qualified. The seller has asked that we talk to everybody before we show them this house. You come into the office. right? That's what you want. Buyer instant, put them into a buyer, identify them at havens, bins. We'll talk more about that when we get to tip, use a lead sheet to keep track on qualifying, keep a stack handy on your desk. Remember, I think I talked about the NCR paper. Did I mention that where you can buy it? Kelly Paper sells 2, 3, 5 sheets so that when you write on it, it'll go through to the next copy. And it'll go through a laser printer, so you print each page twice and you stack them right. And that's, anyhow, let's see this buyer lead sheet. So what you would do is if you wanted, let's say you had loan agents that you were working with, or you had other people that you wanted to give a copy to, you could make a no carbon required paper where it makes copies. But this is I've seen lots of these. They all look pretty much the same. There's nothing wrong with this one. It asks the right kinds of questions. I used a different one. Behavioral style DISC is something that I might talk about later, but I'm not going to do it now. It's a different behavioral styles analysis. And I don't know if that's coming, but we'll talk about that. Probably in negotiation. Take control of the call with 2 questions. Oh, that's cool. Are they in the market to buy? And what price range are they comfortable with? This is called more of a sharp close. I used to say to people when they were coming in to meet me, I would say, or when I met them, before I'd show them property, I would say, just to get an idea of, where you're at, let's suppose that we found today your home. It was everything that you were looking for. Are you in a position to make an offer on it today? I'd ask them that. Sometimes I would simply say, if we found you the right home today, are you prepared to buy it? And if they say no, I want to know why not. Right? Do you understand? I want to know why not. Oh, well, because, you see, our parents were going to give us the money, and they said that if they wouldn't give us the money unless they got to see the home before we wrote an offer on it. So the daddy has to see the home before they're going to give you any money. Do you understand? You want daddy to look at the homes with you, right? Because what's going to happen is you're going to show them 20 homes. They're going to like one. They're going to go to daddy. Daddy's going to say, well, you can do better than this, right? That's what they're going to say because he hadn't seen all the others. And you're going to end up having to show him all of those other homes again. You want the decision maker there. Do you understand? If they say, no, we can't buy now, why not? If they say, sure, I think they'd say, yeah, we're ready. Then I would say, let's go find your new home. That's the words I would use as we walked out to the car. Let's go find your new home. Do you understand? This is different than saying, let's go look at homes, right? Let's go see homes. Let's go drive around for a few hours, right? I know some agents, they literally ought to paint their cars yellow, right? And put a meter on it, because they have like they're unpaid taxi services, right? The idea is to get them in the mindset that we're going to go find a home for you today. Let's go find your new home. Yeah. Well, email is more difficult because it's more impersonal. On the phone sometimes. My idea was there's more than one sale in a sale. My first sale is to sell them on the appointment, right? And so I didn't like to try to sell them on too many things at one time. I want to sell them on coming into the office and meeting with me. Once I've got them here, then I would sell them on using me exclusively as an agent, right? Then I would sell them on that we're going to buy a home today, or if possible. right? That we're not just going to look, but we're going to buy, right? I'm calling about a house, so that's a great property. Everyone is calling on that one. Are you in the market to buy a home? Yes. Excellent. Real quick, while I look at the information, tell me what price range you feel comfortable with. Good for you. Right? Schedule the appointment. If the home happens to be in the price range, make an appointment. This is assuming they are calling you. Schedule an appointment for the buyer consultation. Great. Let's meet in my office. So you would also review other properties on the multiple listing service that you might be interested in. If Maple Street isn't right for you, does that work for you? To preview other properties so you can find the right house. For first-time home buyers, when you come to the office, as well as being able to look at properties, I'll give you a free copy of the book, Your First Home, which contains a wealth of information on the home buying process. Go ahead and set the appointment and ask them if they're working with another agent. I assume they're calling because you're not currently obligated to another agent. Have they signed a written agreement that they were going to work exclusively with an agent? Have they signed a written agreement? Very few. The number that are going to say yes, very few. Keep qualifying close with appointment. If the home is out of the buyer's price range. Now, this material right now is based upon the old school, we ran an ad and they're calling on the ad, right? Right now, on the internet, people know what the price range is, right? So this is less likely to happen. Be able to talk about other properties in their range, always have something to engage them. Print out comparable properties. Now, the way this would work is everybody understands that we don't really use newspapers anymore, right? And, especially young people don't even know what, I have to tell them it's like a blog, but it's on paper, right? That's what but we use Craigslist. So what can you advertise on Craigslist? Well, you ought to take the Craigslist challenge. But you could technically advertise any listing that involves the Keller Williams of Silicon Valley, this brokerage. That would include Gateway, Santa Cruz, and Campbell. It's best practices to let the listing agent know you're doing it and get their permission. As a listing agent, I would always say, great, send me a copy of the ad, because I would send it to the seller and show it to them. As a listing agent, do you think I tried to convince the seller that our whole office was going to try to sell his house? You think I might have said something like that we're a big company with lots of agents and we're all going to be working together to sell your home? You think I might have said something like that? Right? So in my way of looking at it, this was evidence that I wasn't lying to them when I told them that our agents were going to try and sell the home. But what you don't want to have happen is if I get a call from the seller and the seller says, oh, I saw an ad in Craigslist for my house and I clicked on it and it wasn't you, what's going on? And I didn't even know that that's happening, that might cause some unpleasantness that I'd rather avoid. But what you ought to do is you ought to set yourself up in the email alerts under MLS matrix so that you get a copy. Didn't I show this the other day? Of all of the office listings, right? And we do that by putting in seller broker code, which was KWSV, right? Does everybody remember that? And this is not, again, rocket surgery, but you should set up yourself as a contact and create a auto email that lets you know if any properties are listed by KWSV, which is, and you could do it by different areas, so that when something comes on the market that fits to the area you're interested in, you can call the listing agent up and say, congratulations, so you got a listing. By the way, do you need anybody to do an open house? You go to MLS. This is an MLS thing. So we click on active, single family, and if we click here on advanced search, for example, under a hot sheet, we could click on new listing, and we could click in area, So you might not care, but you might just say it could be Santa Clara. You might not care, but let's say, obviously, would you do an open house in Blossom Valley if you were new? Would you do an open house in Santa Clara if you were new? How about Sunnyvale? Milpitas? Morgan Hill? Los Gatos? Right. So you might pick Santa Clara County. So you go to home counties and you click on Santa Clara County. And so we click on OK. And then we click here to add or remove other search fields. I can't believe there isn't already here, but one of them would be the listing broker code. And if we add that and we go back, now we don't have KWSV. And you hit results, and here's a bunch of them. And you would now go down here to save as new auto email, and you would put yourself in as a contact. Create a new contact, put yourself in, write yourself a happy note, and every day it's going to send you early in the morning an email of any new listings. You also could have it in the PM because listings generally don't occur after midnight, right? And you'd get a list of all the office listings, and then you would know, and you could ask the agent if you could do an open house, or tell them, do you mind if I run an ad in Craigslist? And then people will be calling based upon that ad, and you could talk to them, right? Right. You're not allowed to advertise. The multiple listing service guidelines say you cannot run an ad on any listing that does not belong to the broker that you work for. Right? So, for example, Keller Williams Cupertino is not the same broker. Right? So, but you would have to have written permission from the broker, that's not the listing agent, that you could do this. So you should stick with our listings. There's ways of running ads, however, that do not specify an individual property. For example, homes in Blossom Valley under 300,000, click here and you can create an e-edge search for that. That's what that video that I showed on Craigslist 30-day challenge part 1 is going to explain how to do that. Right? I have a video explaining how to do that someplace too, but there's tons of them on Keller Williams. So, be able to talk about other properties. So, if you run, you know what one of the best properties to run an ad on is? A pending sale. Is that illegal to advertise a pending sale? Actually, the Department of Real Estate says that we're supposed to advertise all listings until close of escrow, right? Because they don't always close. Right? My metaphor, which I've been told is not a good one, is that a listing is like a purchase agreement is like an engagement, right? They don't all end in marriage, not right? And the close of escrow is marriage. The acceptance of the offer is simply an engagement. They don't all close, and we're supposed to continue to advertise and market the property until it closes, or the seller says stop. Now, why is it good to run an ad on a pending sale? Because you don't have to show it to them, huh? Number one. And you could say, wow, gee, that was a great property. You know, a lot of people have been calling on that, but I'm sorry, it's already moved to pending status. That means somebody's made an offer which the seller has accepted. It was a really good deal. It was a beautiful home at a great price. Sorry you missed out on it. Can I ask you some questions? What was it about this one that caught your eye? Really? How long have you been looking for a home like that? How many have you seen so far? Why haven't you bought one of those? Have you had a chance to talk to lender yet, find out based on your income and your expenses and the amount of cash you have available, exactly how much home you can afford? Are you working with an agent yet? Yes, you are. Why didn't he tell you about this one when it came on the market? Huh? Do you rent or do you own? How would you like to find out how not to miss the next time your dream home comes on the market? How would you like to find out about it so you have a chance to make an offer before somebody else does? Would that be of interest to you to find out how to keep this from happening again? Come into the office. Right? You see, the fact that it's pending proves there's something wrong with their system because they didn't find out about it when it first came on the market. Same. I don't know if I violated any company policies by saying that, but that's the DRE says we're supposed to advertise it. If you have buyers who are willing to answer questions and stay on the phone, they have the potential to be serious buyers. Go close for the appointment. Demonstrate, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I'd like to invite you to come into my office so we can discuss what you are looking for in your next home and use the MLS to preview properties on our big screen. That way, we'll limit or search the homes that fit your criteria and avoid wasting your time. Are weekends or weekdays better for you? An alternative choice close. Qualify financially. Financial qualification is essential. You know what the difference is between pre-qualification and pre-approval, I hope. I got a dog pre-qualified. We did this just for fun. Right? His name is Skipper. Right? I called a loan agent up and I said, I have a client, his name is Skipper Jones. Skipper has been employed for this long. Skipper makes this much money. Skipper has a good credit rating. And in like 5 minutes, there was a pre-qualification letter coming out of the fax machine. Right? You can get a dog a pre-qualification letter. Right? But that doesn't mean anything. Pre-approval. I would explain to them pre-approval. Do you understand pre-approval? Do you understand that I would recommend that you do that. You talk to a lender. Here's what I'd say. Have you had a chance to talk to a lender yet based on your income and your expenses and the amount of cash you have available, exactly how much home you could afford today? If they say no, I say, well, I really would recommend that you do that. Doing that can save you thousands of dollars when you buy a home. Plus, it would be more of a guarantee that you're going to get your dream home when it comes on the market. How would it save them thousands of dollars? Well, if I'm a seller and I have 2 offers and they were the same and one was from a pre-approved buyer and the one was not pre-approved, which one would I take? Same price. I'd take the pre-approved buyer. When would I take the not pre-approved buyer? Well, maybe if they offered more. A little bit more? Would I take it if they offered just a little bit more? No. How about a lot more? Oh, maybe even not then. I've had cases where a guy offered $80,000 more and he didn't have a pre-approval, and then the seller didn't take it because he wanted it to be over with. He wanted it to be done. So in our market, they're not even going to look at your offer, right? You're not going to be able to get your dream home. The home is going to come on the market. You're going to see it, and you're going to want to buy it. You're not going to be able to buy it, and somebody else is going to buy it. And it's going to happen to you again and again and again. Come into the office. Set the appointment and qualify. Sit back-to-back with a partner. Take turns playing the agent. Handle objections to the appointment. What are the buyers interested in? Objections. There's a video on KW Connect, which I'm probably not going to show you right now because we're going to wrap this up. Is that okay? Because a lot of these are scripts. You need to be good at handling objections. I don't have time. Because your time is so valuable, that's exactly why we need to get together at the office. They're going to save time by going through this process. You need to believe that. And by the way, part of this is to find who's willing, ready, willing. People who say they're ready and they're able, and if they're not willing, the way I heard it explained is you're looking for people that are going your way. Right? Not everybody's going your way. If you're driving to Portland and you see a guy standing on the road and holding up a sign saying Phoenix, don't pick him up. Right? You understand? Don't pick him up. Don't put him in your car. Because what's going to happen is pretty soon you're going to be fighting with him. Right? Because he wants to go someplace that you aren't going. So you're looking for people that are going your way. They have to be willing. Let me talk to my spouse and I'll call you back. Why don't we set up a subject to, right? Why don't we go ahead and set up an appointment subject to your talking to your spouse? I've already seen this house online. I just need to see it to know if I want to buy it. I understand the home you're calling about is amazing. However, the seller's request that I meet with the buyers prior to showing them the property. Right? Come into the office. Not all is not lost if the buyers say no to the appointment, as long as they are not committed to another agent. No means not yet. You need to have that. You have to think that way. Right? You need to put them in a notification. You need to get them into the drip email marketing program that Market Leader has. You need to get them into the system. Offer them online access. Make follow-up calls. Start the property search. I'm not going to go through this. Are there videos on how to set up eEdge and how to use eEdge? Do we have somebody in the office that's willing to work with you? And they're going through that today. So tell Mitty I told you to ask him all these questions. A top agent's buyer's guide will contain all of the following resources. In addition, these are things that you want to have in it. All right? Forms, agency disclosure, a buyer representation agreement. I would print them out using that paper, right, so that I could have them sign it right then and there. I understand we can put it on the screen and do it, but there was something about getting them to sign it right there. I liked handing them the pen and saying right there, sign right there. After out-of-town buyers, customer service focus. How much more of this am I going to do? Providing excess customer service to the buyer begins with your level of preparedness. That's a true statement. Market knowledge and services. Gary Keller is adamant about the need for market-specific knowledge. One of the things I know is that buyers and sellers in the marketplace expect me and you to provide them with knowledge, expertise, and perspective. You need to spend time with the numbers so that you fully understand and appreciate where we are and where we have been. Have I made that point that you really ought to know the market? And do I want to say no? All right. So that's all I've got for today. Wasn't